Yeah, hello, welcome to this video. Yeah, this is a video about my book release. Yeah, as simple as that. This will be, pretty blatant advertisement for my book. I have to be frank about that. This is about promoting my book. Okay, it's out. You can buy it. I've got one copy here, and in fact, I've got a couple of more copies here. Those red books on my shelf, those are copies of the book. I got some from the publisher. Yeah, it's out, and I want to present it to you. Of course, many of you may have gathered some information due to various videos in the past, but still I feel some video is in order to show the contents of the book and maybe give you an idea if it is something for you or not. So it's an opening book, and it's about the Nimzo and Bogo Indian. This is the title of the book, Nimzo and Bogo Indian. Yeah, what is that? Yeah, to start, it's a black opening repertoire book, and it handles everything that happens after d4, knight f6, c4 in a particular fashion. Black goes e6, and he intends to play with bishop to b4, getting that bishop out. And in one case, it's the Nimzo Indian with this pinning idea, or in the other case, if they go knight to f3 or g3, those are the two main alternatives. Black also has this check, and this is the Bogo Indian. This is where the title is coming from. It's an opening repertoire book for black, which basically deals with everything that happens here. So d4, c4. It does not have stuff like, let's say, here, Trompovsky, the queen pawn openings, or bishop f4, or knight c3. Yeah, those kind of rare lines that are not in there. It deals with the most critical move, c4, and then my suggestion in that book is to go e6, bishop b4. The book was intended to be like 260 pages, but it got to 440 at the end, so it's a pretty thick looking book. It's not as bad as it sounds, as the print is relatively large, so it's easy to read, and I think it's very it's reader friendly, let's say. And I also like the production value of the book. Well, really I do. It's not just because it's mine. I think it looks and feels nice in your hand. It makes a good impression. It doesn't feel very cheap or anything. It's not how do you call it? It's not a, in German you say gebunden, bound. No, it's a flexible cover, but it's pretty nice, I think. Yeah, so what is a repertoire book? It's designed to suggest an opening repertoire for black after that. So I'm not dealing with every possible continuation that both sides may play. I'm suggesting a play for black, however, on everything that white may throw at you. So it's a whole bunch of suggestions what to do on particular white ideas. In some cases, I only suggest one particular reply. In some cases, I suggest, or I give you a selection of two or more. In some cases, I will also sprinkle in, let's say, little suggestions like, okay, this is my main move, but if you maybe have some time on your hands, or you are interested in expanding a repertoire, you may also do this and that. So I'm hinting at other ideas at times. You have to limit yourself to something. Yeah? You cannot just present everything nowadays. And otherwise you would get, if you would make a book on the Nimzo and Bogo and show everything possible, it would be a 2,000-page book. It's really not very practical. So let me tell you what is in the book. Yeah, what kind of lines do I present? The whole idea was to try to present lines that follow a somewhat common theme or common kind of structure. And the structure that black is usually aiming for in my book is something like that. I'm going to show you one particular line that is a cornerstone of that repertoire. this line here. This is called the Huebner Variation, called or named after the German Grandmaster Robert Huebner. The Huebner Variation is a very typical variation for the one that I'm trying to reach in the book. Black will often give up his dark squared bishop, capturing on c3, sometimes creating a double pawn, sometimes not. And after the capture, giving up the bishop, he will put his pawns, I'm unmarking that, put his pawns on dark squares, mostly on dark squares, which means that the dark squared bishop is gone. You put them on dark squares, you have a good bishop on c8. This is a good piece in relation to the pawn structure. Black will have a very healthy, long-term, healthy structure. This is what somewhat links the lines together. Whenever possible, I was trying to do something comparable. It's not easy to do. In some cases, it is impossible, and I had to go for something else. But in general, the common link between the lines is a dark squared strategy. Pawns going on dark squares with the bishop exchanged on c3. As mentioned, sometimes possible, sometimes not. But there are some common themes definitely that link the variations together. Let's have an overview. What am I choosing? If we start with the Nimzo Indian, there are a couple of lines, of course. The Nimzo Indian is one of the most popular openings in chess. And I also some time ago made a Chess Openings Uncovered video where I presented the whole Nimzo Indian complex. I'm just going to show you what I do recommend in the book versus various things that White may throw at you. I start with the absolute sidelines. Those are something like Queen b3. Queen b3 is a relatively harmless move, after which I suggest to go c5. This is the prescribed antidote for a very long time. You attack that pawn quite directly, using it or using the fact that the queen is not protecting that pawn anymore. Here, theory hasn't changed in the last, let's say, 10, 20, 30 years. It's considered harmless and probably nothing will change with that. Alternatively, I also mentioned that move, which allows this more typical d6, e5, this dark squared center. c5, however, is just good. Bishop d2, that's a rare move, a bit passive move. After which my suggestion in the book is to play the move knight to c6. After knight f3 to go d6 and simply play in the similar fashion as we would against the classical variation with an early queen c2. We go d6, we go e5, and we put the pawns on the dark squares. As we mentioned, the common strategy or the common link of pawn structure in that book. That's an easy thing to learn, and bishop d2 is a move that even though I've played the Nimzo numerous times, I never got. It's a very rare move. Another move that falls under the somewhat rare category is the move bishop to g5. This is the Leningrad variation. This move, however, is a little bit more serious than the other ones, and it is played more often. Against that, I do recommend something that is not so common. My recommendation is to go again with c5. Almost all of the time I'm playing a c5 based approach because it fits well with that dark squared strategy, putting that on a dark square. d5 is White's reply, and now Black has quite a number of options. One option that would actually fit well into my strategy, and is something that I also mentioned, is something like that. Taking and now go d6 and e5. The reason why I did not choose that is that it has been basically covered to death in other books. Yeah? It's in every other repertoire book on the Nimzo, and not that there are so many, but there are 2 or 3, and they all have that line. Yeah, and I felt well, not the same thing again. Yeah, just let's look at something else. And I found another line which is very good, in fact, and this is a line Okay, it's without h6. It's not a big deal. Where black takes and goes d6. That's quite interesting. Black is basically playing a kind of Benoni, which is also dark squared, but with the bishop on b4. Yeah, that's quite interesting. For example, what is white doing? Mostly they go something like this: e3, like castles, this knight d7, and black will often go knight to e5, possibly knight g6, and an idea is a6, b5, c4 in Benoni style. Black has an excellent score with that line. I was very surprised to see how good that actually is. It's a very good alternative line that leads to interesting play, so that fit my bill perfectly. It is the first occurrence here of this so-called Nimzo Benoni. It's a Benoni type structure, c5, d6, with the bishop here. And this looks weird. Yeah? The bishop is often, in the Benoni, it is on g7 normally. But here this has some points. Sometimes black gets to play c4, b5, and the bishop back, for example. We see that structure in other lines as well. Yeah, the Leningrad, not a very common line, but it can be answered with that suggestion pretty well, I think. What else does white have? One dangerous line really is the Semish variation. It's old-fashioned but interesting. Black takes, and I suggest to play with an early c5 again. The Semish is something that I've played a bit myself with white in blitz chess. The reason is, I have to be totally frank there, I always thought that Semish isn't a good line. I always thought it is bad, basically, putting too much of structural weaknesses in white's camp. But when I looked at this for the book, I really recognized that it has some danger. Black has to be a bit careful. It's not something that is easily played with black. So I was really, I was looking in detail for black to find something good. And the best thing actually for black is to play this total main line. Knight e2, b6, e4, knight to e8. This is the total main line of that opening. And it's also totally okay for black if he knows what he's doing. The move knight e8, by the way, is very key. It's very important to not play some lame move and allow that very, very awkward pin. Okay, I don't want to now show you the whole repertoire in total detail, just an overview. Against the Semish, I recommend the main line. One reason is why I go for the main line is that sometimes also white starts with the move e3, and after castles, c5, bishop d3, c5. This is a line that I recommend against e3, against the Rubinstein. That here white still has this option of a3, and here black's choice is severely limited in comparison to the move a3, the Semish on move 4. But the main line, as I mentioned, this thing is still possible. So it's just, it's one line that is working regardless of white's move order. This is important. The Semish. Dangerous, but if you know what you're doing, not a problem. So what else is there? There is f3. This line is important. It's gaining in popularity and has been the choice in many top-level games. What is my recommendation? My recommendation is to basically fight fire with fire. This is an aggressive line, and you should counter aggressively. My suggestion is to play c5, d5, castles, and now after e4, I give two lines actually. This is a case where I give two lines. My main recommendation is the move b5, which is a very sharp approach that can really net you quick victories if white is making any mistake. It's a very sharp continuation. On the other hand, it's also something that requires to learn some specific theoretical lines. This is something where you have to put in a little bit of work. It's work to play that. White, for example, can play this kind of thing, gaining lots of space, and black is counter-attacking in the center. Very sharp stuff, but very interesting. So it's worth looking at, but it's sharp. For those who don't feel so much like learning that, there's also the move d6, which I recommend as an alternative line. This is the line that you can play without so much concrete knowledge. For example, this was played by Magnus Carlsen in a game last year against Nakamura. Carlsen also didn't go for that super sharp line, quite typically, but goes for that. This is interesting. It still can lead to gambit play, like this, for example. This is a stronger version even of that we saw before. Or let's say knight e2, again b5 is good. It's a bit of a delay of that b5 move. In some cases, however, like after knight f4, black is not really giving up a pawn, but gets an interesting Benoni type of position after a6. Recently, Topalov played this against Grishuk. Topalov is also an expert of that line. That I don't feature, but I go a6 as Topalov did in another game, which also gives black very interesting play. That's a really aggressive variation. But it's a little bit less critical on concrete moves than the other b5 line. So against f3, you have to play a somewhat sharp variation. If you play something meek, I don't like the position for black. That's f3. Knight f3, another option. This is a totally different approach to f3. Here white is more putting his hope or getting some on piece play. Again, I recommend to play with c5. Yeah, attacking the center from a dark square. White normally continues with g3. That's one point of that, fear and shadowing. And now my recommendation is to go like this, attacking that knight. I have a huge experience with that line in Blitzer. If you watch my channel regularly, you probably will find a couple of games with that. And usually my results are pretty okay. White now has two moves. He can play queen d3, after which normally this is reached. Here black's position is very comfortable. Or if they know it a little bit better, they play bishop d2. After that, I'm taking and take here. And then here, well, black has a couple of moves, queen b6 castles. That's not very move order dependent. But the general thing that what happens is that black, after castles and d6, builds up a hedgehog type of position that is a bit non-typical, but for the book and also for the Nimzo. But it is a hedgehog position where black has the bishop pair. That's pretty nice, because if you think about it, something like this, for example. Let's just put some moves on. Okay, white probably, okay, b2 wasn't hanging, but I just want to show the point. If white wants to get somewhere against this hedgehog type of setup, he often has to push pawns forward, b4, f4, and so on. And ultimately, something will open up, and then the bishop pair is important, especially the dark squared bishop. I like that idea, and this is also a line that scores pretty decently for black. So this is my recommendation against this line. Alternatively, I also analyze this a little bit for people who want to give the double pawn. Yeah, not a bad alternative. So these are the sidelines, let's say. The Nimzo, however, I mean the sidelines. If you want a statistical overview, let's say, of the Nimzo, 30% of the time people play queen c2, the other 30% they play e3, and the rest is the other 40%. So the sidelines comprise about 35 to 40%, and in 30% of the time you will get queen c2, and the other 30% you get e3. Let's start with queen c2. The classical variation. Here I'm recommending knight c6, the Zurich variation after the Swiss city, Zurich. Knight c6, it attacks the pawn, and the main benefit of that line is that you get this d6 e5 center almost all of the time. There's really, I think there is no line where white is avoiding that in some way. So you get the desired structure. c5 in this particular case, which is what we play in other cases, Here, after takes, is an entirely different line. This would lead to something that looks more like a Sicilian or sometimes like an English hedgehog. Yeah. Knight c6, an interesting move. Knight f3, and then we go d6, and my idea is always to play e5. White has two options here. He can try to recapture with the bishop on c3, or he can recapture with the queen. In some cases, this is one continuation. In some cases, I suggest aggressive lines for black. For example, here after castles b4, black has a very interesting pawn sacrifice with e5. This is very interesting. Yeah, and something like that gives black excellent compensation for the pawn. This is one line that I analyze quite deeply. However, if you don't want to sacrifice a pawn, you can also go a5 in that particular position and prevent b4. And later you will play queen e7 and e5. The good thing about the Zurich variation is it can be played almost without knowing so many concrete lines. I give lots of concrete lines, and I give lots of sample games and sample variations to illustrate how this line is played. It's something where you have to develop some kind of feel for the position. Then you will be able to play it really without recalling specific lines. This is a common theme also in the book. I wanted to present something which gives you the chance to still play that position in case you have forgotten what you learned. In some cases it's difficult. For example, against this f3 line that I showed earlier, I want to remind you where I recommend this b5 approaches. Here it's really essential to learn a little bit of stuff, but in return you get a very active, very interesting position. Against queen c2, the Zurich is something that I think many players play without really knowing that much. Yeah, they just think, okay, I want the pawns here, d6 and e5, and then I'm good. Okay, I deliver a little bit more, but in general, it is like that. You can play that without particular memory requirements. However, I have to say that in some lines, like this for example, white plays e3, it is not clear if black equalizes completely. There are 2 or 3 lines, maybe 2, where white maintains a slight advantage. For example, after e5, d5, knight b8, knight d2, I think white has a little bit of an advantage. This also was featured in blitz games of mine, where I referred to that as one of the best lines. However, it's not played that often. There's just one player online who continues to play that against me, but many others, even grandmasters, play different lines. It's not the end of the world, but it's something that I deal with in an honest way. I really don't feel like claiming everything is rosy when white in fact maybe has a slight advantage, and in this case he can get one with very precise play. However, we don't make it easy for white. If you know your stuff here, it won't be an easy task. Yeah, that's the Zurich variation in short. The other main continuation is e3, the Rubinstein variation. After which I recommend a c5 based approach. However, I like to start with castles and not with c5. There's one reason for that. After c5, knight e2, white manages the move a3, and black will probably have to take on c3, and white will recapture. There are a couple of lines to avoid that, but these didn't feel right for me in my repertoire context. I prefer to castle. One point is that after knight to e2, if white intends to go a3 and after the capture to recapture with the knight, so let's say I do something stupid.
Check.
Yeah, this kind of thing. This is just not good, yeah. Black has given up his bishop and white doesn't have any particular problem, yeah, let's say in return. He managed to recapture on c3 with his knight, and he will castle shortly. So I think that black should play in a way that lets this knight stay on e2, that it obstructs the further development. So my move is rook e8 in my book. The idea is after a3 to drop the bishop back to f8. It's a very neat maneuver. And it asks white, how are you going to develop your king side now? The consequence is that white in many cases has to spend more time. He has to play g3, for example, after which d5 will put a good foothold in the center. If you want a dark squared strategy, you can also go d6, e5 here. It's also not bad. But here d5 is just better. Yeah, this is, sorry, g3, d5. This is a case where we are playing pawns on light squares. You cannot do it all of the time. Let's say here's a case where this kind of setup is better. If you really insist, you can go d6, e5, but it's a bit different there. If white goes d5, black can play something like d6, let's say knight g3 and c6. Very interesting, attacking that center. In some cases, you can get a Benoni structure after takes, and c5 even. But in some cases, you just take a couple of times on d5 and develop quickly. Very interesting. I like those lines. And they can be played without so much knowledge of concrete lines. If you play through the key games in my book, and this is something that I should mention, the book is based around games. It features games that illustrate the ideas. I think about 50. I don't remember exactly. How many is it? Let me check. It's 44. The number changed a little bit in the process. It's centered around games, so I'll have complete games for the lines that also show how the middle game went and give you ideas how the whole game proceeded. Yeah, this was knight e2. The other main option is bishop d3 here. Then we go c5, and now after knight e2, we come to a position where, unfortunately, again, a dark squared setup with d6 is just not cutting it. Yeah, white will get the bishop pair under very favorable circumstances here, without any problem. Yeah, not losing time, not doubling the pawns. So I'm recommending d5 here. That will lead to IQP positions, like after, let's say, castles, something like that can happen. Yeah, black has no problem there whatsoever, but it's a bit different than the other variation. It's just a case where other things are not good. But no big deal, really. Black's setup is somewhat similar, almost regardless of what white is doing, so not much to worry. Knight f3 is the main continuation. Then we go knight c6, castles, takes, d6, and we get to the Huebner after e4, e5, or after knight d2, e5. This is really the essence of our dark square strategy, the Huebner. And I'm very satisfied with what I got there at the end. It's a very complex line strategically, but also very rewarding to study. If you know that line well, and I'm not talking about concrete moves, talking about the ideas, motifs, and so on, and I'm really concentrating on the different things there in the description, I think you have excellent chances there. It's not like excellent chances. It's not like black is better, but it is super complex, that position, from a strategic point of view, and you will very often find that white players have difficulties with that position, simply because it's so strategically complex. So that's a very nice chapter, I think, in my book. It's one that I'm really very satisfied with, especially because at the beginning I had trouble to understand some things in that opening, and I think I got somewhere at the end. So I'm pretty satisfied there. Yeah, that was the Nimzo. Yeah, the Huebner against e3. So what about this? Yeah, this leads to the Bogo Indian. Check. The good thing about this is there are only 3 replies that need to be checked in a book. Knight c3 is a transposition to the Nimzo. We already had that. By the way, in the Nimzo Indian, before someone writes that in the comments, there's also this move, but after c5 we will transpose to knight f3 on move 4 and then g3. This is just a transposition. I did not forget that in the book, just under different move order. So knight f3, check. The original Bogo moves are bishop d2 and knight d2. Let's start with this move, bishop d2. My recommendation in the book is a5. The idea is, okay, we have to protect that bishop, yeah? So let's protect it. And the general idea is that black will set up like that. He will play d6, e5 according to the general strategic outline, and will try to play with dark squared pawns with the bishop outside of the chain. Sometimes it will trade, sometimes not. In this particular case, quite often the bishop will not be traded actually, the b4 bishop. One thing is, for example, if white goes, let's say bishop g5, this theme is also in other lines, but black will take and quite often reroute this bishop to c5. In some cases, this can really lead to interesting attacking games. It sounds kind of weird, yeah? Black attacking, how is this going to work? Yeah, well, quite often knight comes to e5, bishop to c5, and then there are a couple of pieces really geared towards the king side. Even h5, h4 is sometimes an idea, well, after castling, however. An interesting line. I really like that choice. It's a bit much now to show all the sub-variations, but in general, I think black is in pretty decent shape, and you can play that without knowing that many concrete lines. I'm showing them, of course, going through, let's say, knight c3 here, or queen c2, or the capture. Yeah, there are a couple of things possible, but that is my main choice there. It's pretty much this setup all of the time. The only slight exception is if white goes for knight c3. After that, I don't think that d6 is entirely equal, but there's an alternative line, b6, which is also quite nice. One point is, and this is a funny point, I'll just show the funny point, is a4, intending a3. Yeah, even check. This is an idea featured in the book that's very cute. Rook suddenly operating on the 5th rank. Quite nice. Yeah, so this is an interesting complex of lines. This is bishop d2. White also has knight bd2. This move is a bit trickier to face in a repertoire book. Black has tried a number of lines, and it seems to be that the most interesting continuation is castles. However, this is very sharp. Castles, a3, bishop e7, e4, and now g5. Yeah, black is counter-striking in the center. He's better developed, yeah, already castled, but there are some concrete problems. Let's have a look. Bishop d3, c5, all very normal. And now white has that move h4. This was virtually unknown until like 2011. But nowadays, this is the total rage in the knight bd2 Bogo. White just threatens, very simply, bishop h7 wins. And black has to react to that threat. You cannot, simply not, play something like, I don't know, knight c6, yeah? Then this wins. It's the Greek gift. So, black has to be circumspect. The only move, really, playable move, is g6. Which looks kind of weird, I know, but that is the only playable move. And now after h5, let's say we take, and it gets very, very sharp, quite obviously. I feature that line for black. It is, I think, okay, and the current theoretical state is quite okay for black, really. But it is very, very sharp. I analyzed that thoroughly, and this is something that I really can truly recommend, especially because the sidelines, if white is doing something else, not this kind of caveman style approach, in all other cases, black is absolutely fine. For example, for years they tried stuff like b4, after which a5, b5, c5. Black already seems to be in good shape. Or there's also, that was wrong, that button. No, of course not. Sorry, a3 back. or they tried like this, they tried just castling, for example. Here black also is in good shape. In many cases he's even slightly better. So it's really a case of make h4 work or not. I don't think it is that terrible for black. I think it's a pretty unclear line where black seems to be okay, but you have to be ready for it. It is sharp. So I thought that it would be sensible for my book not to rely entirely on that line, and also presenting something that is less memory intense. And I came up with the line d6, which is kind of unknown. It's a bit of a rare line, but it's not bad. I studied this and played it myself successfully against the Grandmaster only about 2 years ago. The idea is, again, for black to set up a dark squared center. If white plays very slowish, like let's say g3, we can easily do this and go e5. No problem at all. The other line, and this is a bit more dangerous, I think, is white going a3, after which we have to take, check, and white is recapturing. Can also take with the bishop. Both is possible. After that, black should go or should switch his setup a little bit. Here, for example, it does make sense. You can go e5, it's not terrible, but I recommend a different approach. I recommend to go with b6, bishop here, bishop b7, and black's position is very, very, very healthy. You can put a piece on e4, most likely the bishop, and you have no particular problem. You can choose various ways to attack the center. This is the precise position that I got against Grandmaster Malachatko 2 years ago, and I had a good position the whole game, really. It was very satisfying. I think if white is very precise, he can keep a small advantage here, but it's not something very troublesome. I didn't mind to allow that. The thing was, back then when I was playing in that tournament, I had the choice. I could play that super sharp line or play d6, and I noticed that Malachatko is a huge expert, and I didn't have much time to refresh my memory with the sharp stuff, so I decided to play d6 and just play a game, let's say. This is the just play a game move. So I'm glad that I have those two alternatives there. If people are too scared, let's say, or intimidated by this move here with those sharp complications, I give that alternative with d6. A third thing that is in the book, it's a very short chapter, but white can also do this, of course, for a Catalan, for trying to get to a Catalan. d5, bishop g2 would be the Catalan opening. Check. Still the check. This is one positive aspect of the Bogo Indian. In case of g3, we still play bishop before check. It's basically the same thing. There are just very, very small differences there to the knight f3 move order. White is committed to g3, but not to knight f3. Sometimes he can try to put a knight on e2, but it is not very dangerous. We can still do this, and the overwhelming main line now is still knight f3, transposing to the main line Bogo. I feature the sidelines, but I think none of them are particularly dangerous. It's good to have seen once, so this is why I feature it, but it's not a big deal. Knight d2 is also possible, after which you have this move to transpose to what I showed earlier. Or if you don't want that, I also feature the move c5, which seems to be okay as well. This is how I played last year against the German FIDE master. Also, I got a very nice position there and won a good game. Yeah, this is the repertoire overview for my book. It took a while, but it's a big area of lines. I'm looking at the contents. No, I didn't forget anything. Would have been a bit embarrassing if I don't know my own book. What I can definitely say is that I don't remember all the lines that I have written in the book. I must be honest there. I simply don't. But the thing is, if you choose the right lines, it does not matter so much. You have excellent chances to find the moves over the board. If you have a good understanding of the common themes and the ideas. And I try to be idea heavy, yeah, trying to explain where the pieces should go and so on. So I think it's helpful to choose lines like that. Yeah, the book is in stores. Yeah, you can order it online. If you are in the US, I think you have to wait a couple of days to get it from Amazon, for example. I think it is scheduled for in about a week. I'm not quite sure. About a week, I think, from here. The other way to get the book, and this is something that I mentioned in an earlier video, the other way to get the book is directly from me. The thing is that it's part of my contract of an author that I can get copies of the book at a slightly reduced price. So I can buy books from the publisher and sell them directly, which means that per book I earn a little bit of something. It's not much. It's not like I can buy a Ferrari next week, but it earns me a couple of bucks per book. So if you want, you can also order it from me. I'm quick with sending out, and the costs will be about the same as when you order it from a shop. It depends a little bit from where you order it. What I do charges for the book, I charge the German retail price, which is 25 euros. And I also charge something for sending the book out, which is 3 euros for German people, for German addresses, and it's 8 euros for outside Germany. So if you're in the US, it would cost you 33 euros in total, which makes it about, if you want US dollars, like 37 or so. You would need to really put it in a converter. Means that probably from Amazon in like 2 weeks you'll get it cheaper, but if you get it from me, it will be a couple of extra dollars, but I earn a little bit of something. And I also, of course, when you order from me, I will also write some line, yeah, like, yeah, this book is for person X, enjoy it, much success with playing the opening, or any other specific line you want me to write. So if you're interested in a copy directly from me, it would be nice. And I'm quick with sending out. If you pay via PayPal, that's the easy way to do it. Then I will basically send out the same day or the day after that if the post office is closed. I'm really quick with sending out. I don't want to give out all the information there, like my like everything. If you are interested in ordering such a copy, please drop a mail at my mail address, Christoph Zielecki, for first name, last name, @gmail.com. I will also put it in the video. And contact me by mail and we will be quick in arranging things. Yeah, and you can also, by the way, read an extract of my book on the homepage of the publisher Everyman Chess. All that will also be visible in the video. Okay, well, guys, thanks for watching, and enjoy the book. If you have it already, or if you want to order it from some source or from me directly, it would be best. Yeah, enjoy it. I think it's good. I'm satisfied. I think it's a good book. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.